And the fact is that over the past 2 decades, there's been a series of crises in finance, in health, in energy, and geopolitics that have laid bare collectively the risks of extreme global integration. And more recently, great powers have begun using economic integration as weapons, tariffs as leverage, financial infrastructure as coercion, supply chains as vulnerabilities to be exploited. And the multilateral institutions on which countries have relied, the WTO, the UN, the COP, that architecture of collective problem solving are all under threat. As a result of this, many countries are concluding that they must develop greater strategic autonomy. And that impulse is understandable. When the rules no longer protect you, you must protect yourself. A country that cannot feed itself, fuel itself, or defend itself has few options.
Something big just happened in Mumbai, and most people missed how strategic it really was. Before we jump in, tell me where you're tuning in from, and remember to like and subscribe. Your support helps the channel grow and keeps these stories coming. On a global stage in India, Mark Carney didn't shout. He didn't escalate. He didn't even mention Donald Trump by name, and honestly, he didn't have to. Instead, he painted a picture of the world we're actually living in. A world where tariffs are no longer economic tools, but political weapons. A world where trade isn't just about exchange, it's about leverage. A world where access to markets comes with a price tag attached. And as I watched that speech, what struck me wasn't the tone, it was the control. In front of global business leaders and investors, Carney made something very clear. Canada is not scrambling to survive volatility. Canada is building strength beyond it. That's a powerful distinction. This wasn't just another diplomatic speech. It wasn't ceremonial language. It was a declaration, calmly delivered, that Canada will not operate under coercion, that it will not treat economic pressure as the new normal. Carney framed today's global order not as a temporary phase, not as a passing storm, but as a rupture, a break in the old system. He pointed to 2 decades of financial crises, energy shocks, health emergencies, geopolitical fractures, and said plainly, extreme global integration has exposed vulnerabilities. Then came the line that really mattered. Tariffs as leverage, financial systems as coercion, supply chains as vulnerabilities. That's not abstract theory. That's not academic language for policy students. That's a description of what we've watched unfold in real time, particularly under the Trump administration's trade posture. And here's what impressed me. Carney didn't rant. He didn't attack. He didn't turn it into a personality conflict. He diagnosed it. And there's a difference. When a leader calmly explains the weaponization of trade in front of global investors, that's not outrage. That's positioning. That's telling the world, we understand the game, and we're adjusting our strategy accordingly. That moment in Mumbai wasn't about criticizing the United States. It was about signaling to the rest of the world that Canada sees the structural shift and is preparing for it.
You know, you're speaking about volatility in the world, and you talked about the new world order. Despite the U.S. Supreme Court ruling, President Trump is now talking about a 15% tariff. 10% is in place at this point in time. An executive order for 15 hasn't come. Are you prepared, or should we be prepared for a world where a baseline tariff is just going to have to be the way to do business with the U.S.? That is going to have to be the price to access the U.S. market. Is that now a realization and an acknowledgement?
Well, President Trump has been clear for months that being part of access to the U.S. market, you should pay, quote unquote, for access to the U.S. market. Sometimes that's in tariffs, sometimes that's in changing regulation, sometimes that's in investment commitments into the United States. We've seen all of those. I think this will likely settle down into tariffs, but the ability of the U.S. administration to do that over the longer term will be more likely determined by more conventional methods in trade agreements or not, than what are temporary measures. Even so-called 232 measures are temporary in the sense that they're addressing a specific perceived dislocation. And obviously the Section 122 ones that are used now have a time limit of 150 days. As a result of this, many countries are concluding that they must develop greater strategic autonomy. And that impulse is understandable. When the rules no longer protect you, you must protect yourself. A country that cannot feed itself, fuel itself, or defend itself has few options.
What really stood out to me wasn't anger, it wasn't defiance for headlines, it was discipline. Carney's answer to tariff pressure wasn't outrage, it was autonomy. When he said, "When the rules no longer protect you, you must protect yourself," that wasn't a throwaway line, that was doctrine. That line reframes the entire debate. This isn't about scoring points against Trump. It's not about trading insults across borders. It's about sovereignty in a system where the old guarantees no longer feel guaranteed. And I think that's the key difference here. This isn't anti-Trump rhetoric. It's pro-Canada strategy. Carney made it clear that a resilient economy in today's world can't depend on one market, one trade partner, one set of political moods. A truly strategic economy is diversified. It's layered. It's built on partnerships, not isolation, not dependence. That's a direct rejection of tariff dependency politics. The idea that if you want access to a dominant market, you simply accept the price and adjust. Carney's message was the opposite. If access to one market comes with a toll booth, then you don't argue about the toll. You build 10 new highways. That's not emotional, that's structural. And then he pivoted from philosophy to power. He didn't stay in abstract language. He moved straight into numbers. Tax cuts, defense expansion, $500 billion in industrial strategy, slashing red tape, massive investment incentives. That's not a country bracing for impact. That's a country repositioning itself. He didn't stand there and say, "We're worried about tariffs." He said, "Canada is cutting its effective investment tax rate below the United States." Think about that. Instead of reacting to pressure from the outside, he's reshaping the internal conditions of the economy. That's a counterpunch, but it's not loud. It's structural. Because leverage only works when you can corner someone. But if Canada becomes more competitive on tax, faster on project approvals, stronger in defense, and more attractive for capital, then the tariff threat loses its sharp edge. This is how you neutralize leverage, not by arguing about it, by outbuilding it.
We put in place what we call a super deduction, a broad-based 100% tax write-off for everything from manufacturing assets to intelligence infrastructure, R&D, clean energy, and EVs. And on top of this, we've instituted investment tax credits for across the clean electricity chain, from critical minerals through to storage. These measures reduce our marginal effective tax rate for investment to just 13%. Let me translate that in relative terms. That's 4.5 percentage points below the US level, and it is one half the G7 average. We are slashing red tape. Admittedly, the red tape for which Canada unfortunately had become infamous. We're slashing that red tape. All major projects will be approved within 2 years in cooperation with the provinces.
What concerns you about what we're seeing today the most in light of the many developments that have taken place even since you made that speech in Davos?
I think I'm more optimistic, but where the
Than you were
concern-
in Davos?
Well, I'm more optimistic because of the reaction to that speech. And there's a sort of public reaction, but then the quality of the discussions with a wide range of countries who are all thinking the same thing, who all realize that there's many areas to partner together, and to be frank, who all want a positive agenda. They want to build, they want to move forward, they're confident. I mean, this to me, it describes India, it also describes Canada. And as opposed to being in a defensive world where you're waiting for the next tweet, and you're worried about your core economic relationships. No, build a relationship you can rely on for the long term. That lowers my worry level because there's just so much to do. And as an example, the scale of what's being discussed between Canada and India is a perfect illustration.
This, to me, was the defining moment of the entire speech. Carney was asked directly about the 15% tariff threat. No room to dodge, no ambiguity. The question was simple. Are we just going to have to accept that paying for access to the US market is the new normal? And he didn't flinch. He didn't spiral into alarmism. He didn't dramatize it. He acknowledged the reality. Yes, the United States is framing market access as something you pay for. Yes, tariffs may settle into place in some form. But then he pivoted. And this is where the contrast became crystal clear. Instead of obsessing over the tariff number, he reframed the horizon. Build relationships you can rely on long term. Stop waiting for the next tweet. That line alone says everything. One leadership style operates in cycles of volatility. React, escalate, counter, reset. The other steps outside the cycle entirely and asks, what does durability look like? In Mumbai, on a global stage, Carney made it clear which path Canada is choosing, not volatility management, structural resilience. And that's the bigger story here. He didn't shout. He didn't posture. He didn't escalate tensions for applause. He articulated something far more serious. A doctrine, a framework. Value-based realism, strategic autonomy, diversification over dependence, strength over fear. While headlines swirl around tariff percentages and executive orders, Canada is quietly adjusting the architecture of its economy, lowering investment costs, expanding defense capacity, deepening ties across Europe and the Indo-Pacific, embedding itself in networks that don't hinge on a single political cycle. That's not reaction, that's repositioning. This wasn't just a speech delivered in Mumbai. It was a signal to markets, to allies, and yes, to Washington. Canada will not normalize paying for access. Canada will build leverage of its own. And when a country shifts from dependence to options, the balance changes. That's why I think this moment matters more than the tariff number itself. If you want sharp, no-spin analysis of the power shifts shaping Canada's future, this is where we break it down. We go beyond the headlines and into the strategy behind them. So now I want to hear from you. Is diversification and strategic autonomy the right long-term response to tariff pressure? Or should Canada prioritize repairing that core U.S. relationship first? Let me know in the comments.